Millionaire husband cheats on pregnant wife. She brings a lawyer and makes him regret. Every marriage has secrets, but some secrets have the power to shake the very foundation of a relationship. Imagine a luxurious mansion perched on a hilltop in Beverly Hills, glittering with chandeliers and echoing with whispered promises, promises that were once sacred vows. James Harrington, a self-made millionaire known for his suave charm and lavish lifestyle, seemed to have everything: success, respect, and a devoted wife, Elizabeth. But behind their perfect facade, betrayal lurked in the shadows. In this enthralling saga, prepare to witness the unraveling of a marriage, the fierce legal battle that followed, and the unexpected twists that changed their lives forever. Elizabeth Liz Harrington still remembered the first time she locked eyes with James Jim Harrington. It was at a charity gala hosted at the famous Beverly Hills Hotel, an event organized by longtime philanthropist and talk show host Oprah Winfrey. Liz was a bright-eyed intern at a local non-profit, tasked with networking and securing donations for a children's literacy project. Dressed in a simple black cocktail dress, she felt out of place among the glittering attendees draped in designer gowns and tuxedos. Then Jim appeared, dashing, confident, every bit the charming tycoon. He introduced himself with a warm smile, praising her dedication to the cause, and graciously offered a generous donation. That night, Liz thought she'd encountered a hero, a man who genuinely cared for others, who wanted to make the world a better place while relishing the finer things in life. Little did she know that this initial spark of admiration would blossom into a whirlwind romance, and eventually a marriage that people envied. Their union was hailed by all who knew them as the perfect blend of hearts and minds, a self-made millionaire and a compassionate soul, forging a powerful partnership that seemed destined for the happiest of endings. The early years of their marriage were reminiscent of a fairy tale. Jim's real estate ventures had exploded in profitability, earning him a reputation for turning rundown properties into luxurious developments. From penthouse apartments overlooking Los Angeles to boutique hotels along the California coast, Jim's name was synonymous with prestige. Liz thrived in this environment, using her background in non-profit work to spearhead philanthropic initiatives alongside her husband's business expansions. Their life was a constant parade of fundraisers, exclusive parties, and travel to exotic destinations. When Jim purchased a sprawling estate in the heart of Beverly Hills, a modern mansion with floor-to-ceiling windows, an infinity pool, and breathtaking views of the city, Liz was overjoyed. She had grown up in a modest family in Ohio and never imagined waking up each morning to the sun rising over Los Angeles from such a luxurious vantage point. Yet, beneath the sheen of success and contentment, small signs of strain began to appear. Late-night phone calls, hushed conversations behind closed doors, and Jim's increasingly elusive schedule started to chip away at Liz's sense of security. Still, she pushed aside her doubts, convinced that her husband's business demands were the source of his distraction. Liz's lingering unease was momentarily banished when Jim invited her to accompany him to a high-profile awards ceremony in New York City, where he was slated to be recognized for his contributions to urban renewal. She saw the trip as a chance to rekindle their romance and silence the nagging suspicion that something was off. They stayed in a lavish penthouse suite at the Plaza Hotel, indulging in room service breakfasts and late-night strolls in Central Park. At the ceremony, Liz proudly watched Jim step onto the stage to accept his award. Dressed in a tailored black tux, he flashed his signature charismatic grin, thanked the audience, and praised Liz for being his inspiration. "Without my wife," he said, "none of this would be possible." Tears welled in Liz's eyes, and for a moment her heart soared with the belief that they were unbreakable. But that fleeting sense of harmony soon evaporated. After returning to their suite, Jim excused himself for a supposed business call. Liz caught the furtive look in his eyes as he stepped out onto the balcony, phone in hand. Her stomach churned with anxiety. She told herself she was being paranoid, yet part of her recognized the warning signs of a changing tide. Back in Los Angeles, the daily routines continued. Jim left early for meetings, Liz organized charity events, and the house staff came and went, maintaining the polished facade of their mansion. Liz's sense of unease grew more pronounced when she discovered a lipstick-stained handkerchief in the passenger seat of Jim's Aston Martin. She tried to rationalize it, maybe a client or a colleague, perhaps even her own friend who had ridden with him. But her instincts knew better. The color was a bold shade of crimson she would never wear, and it smelled faintly of a perfume she didn't recognize. Hoping for reassurance, Liz confided in her closest friend, Rebecca Chan, a former college roommate who now worked as a psychologist in Pasadena. Rebecca's advice was gentle but firm. Speak to Jim. Don't let your fears fester in silence. Determined to salvage her peace of mind, Liz confronted Jim that evening. She showed him the handkerchief, voice trembling, tears threatening to spill. Jim brushed it off with a carefully measured laugh, attributing it to an associate who'd borrowed his car. He enveloped her in a reassuring hug, whispering, "You're the only one for me." For a moment, Liz believed him, or at least wanted to believe, sir. Shortly after the handkerchief incident, Liz's suspicions found fresh fuel in the form of anonymous messages on social media. Her Instagram DMs were suddenly filled with cryptic warnings. "He's lying to you. Ask him about Sabrina, and the truth will ruin you." Initially, Liz dismissed these as trolls seeking attention. However, the recurrence of the name Sabrina gnawed at her. She had never heard Jim mention anyone by that name. Late one evening, as Liz reviewed charity proposals in her home office, she decided to search through Jim's phone records. She discovered repeated calls and text messages to a number she didn't recognize. The contact was saved as S. Delgado. Although guilt tugged at her for snooping, the wave of dread she felt was undeniable. Who was this woman, and why was Jim contacting her so frequently? Nerves fraying, Liz tried to focus on a philanthropic event she had the following day. The event, a cancer research fundraiser, was also sponsored by the Harrington Foundation. She knew her professional responsibilities demanded a composed, gracious demeanor. Yet her mind was consumed with the name she'd uncovered, Sabrina Delgado. Little did she know that unmasking Sabrina would be the first step toward a storm that would upend her life. At the cancer research fundraiser, Liz made every effort to smile and network with grace. The venue, an elegant ballroom in downtown Los Angeles, shimmered with crystal chandeliers and sophisticated floral arrangements. Celebrities like Kim Kardashian and Leonardo DiCaprio showed up to lend their star power. Amid the clink of champagne glasses and hushed conversations, Liz felt a growing sense of detachment. Normally, she found joy in these gatherings, championing causes close to her heart, but that night her eyes kept darting toward Jim. He was surrounded by well-wishers and potential investors, flashing that million-dollar smile. Liz noticed how his gaze occasionally drifted to his phone, how his hand would slide into his pocket, checking messages. The pattern repeated itself every few minutes. Her heart thumped with worry. Could he be texting Sabrina Delgado right now under her very nose? Any attempt to confront him during the event would have caused a scene that might embarrass the Harrington Foundation. Liz remained silent, though the tension coiled like a spring inside her. She plastered on her social smile, shaking hands, making polite conversation, desperate to maintain the veneer of the perfect philanthropic power couple. But deep inside, she felt the walls closing in. That night, long after the fundraiser ended, Liz lay awake in their master bedroom. The room was a testament to Jim's wealth and taste, a king-sized bed with a handcrafted Italian headboard, plush Egyptian cotton sheets, and an attached balcony overlooking the sparkling city lights. Yet none of that comfort soothed her growing alarm. Jim was in his separate study, supposedly sending out emails. The house was eerily silent, save for the occasional hum of the air conditioning. Unable to bear the uncertainty, Liz took a bold step. She installed a discreet tracker on Jim's phone. It was a decision that filled her with self-disgust and a measure of anger. Anger at herself for not trusting her husband, and anger at Jim for making her feel this way. The digital line she crossed that night felt like a point of no return, but she was determined to uncover the truth. Days passed, and Liz meticulously monitored Jim's location through the app. Often, it simply confirmed his usual routine: business lunches, site visits, board meetings. But one afternoon, he went off schedule, heading to a less familiar part of town in West Hollywood. A jolt of apprehension compelled Liz to follow him. Liz's pulse hammered as she drove, keeping a careful distance. She had never done anything like this before, tailing her own husband, worrying that she might be mistaken for a private investigator in a crime drama. Jim's car eventually pulled into the parking lot of a chic rooftop bar, the kind that attracted the city's young and glamorous crowd. Liz recognized it from celebrity gossip columns. Apparently, it was a hotspot for actors, influencers, and socialites. From a safe vantage point, Liz watched as Jim stepped out of his car. Not long after, a striking woman with long, dark hair approached him. They hugged intimately. Liz felt as though she'd been punched in the stomach. She didn't need to guess who the woman was. This had to be Sabrina Delgado. Liz stayed in her car, tears stinging her eyes, watching them enter the bar together. Her world felt like it was spinning wildly off its axis. She snapped a few distant photos with her phone, uncertain of what she might need later. She contemplated storming inside to confront them, but something held her back, a mixture of fear, humiliation, and a grim desire to gather more evidence before making a move. In the days that followed, Liz rode a tidal wave of emotions: shock, fury, sorrow, and even a strange sense of relief that her suspicions had not been baseless illusions. Yet along with that relief came the crushing reality of betrayal. She couldn't sleep. She would lie awake, replaying every kind gesture and loving moment she shared with Jim, trying to pinpoint where it all went wrong. She debated confronting Jim outright, but decided she needed more concrete proof. She wanted him to have no room for excuses or lies. Rebecca, concerned for Liz's deteriorating mental state, recommended a trusted private investigator named Andrew Garcia. Andrew had once worked undercover for the Los Angeles Police Department and now specialized in sensitive marital investigations. With a heavy heart, Liz enlisted his help. Andrew proved efficient. Within a week, he provided Liz with photographic and video evidence of Jim meeting Sabrina at upscale restaurants, cozy coffee shops, and even a private bungalow at the Beverly Hills Hotel, the same place that hosted the charity gala where Liz and Jim had first locked eyes. Each piece of evidence was like a dagger, slicing through any lingering hope Liz had harbored that this might all be a misunderstanding. Jim, oblivious to Liz's discoveries, continued his double life with increasingly brazen moves. He started coming home later and leaving earlier. When questioned, he insisted his business expansions demanded more of his time. All the while, he'd still wrap his arm around Liz at events, making sure to present the image of a devoted husband. This duplicity made Liz's blood boil, yet she remained outwardly composed, waiting for the right moment to strike. One evening, Liz decided to go through Jim's personal study in search of financial records. She wasn't sure what she hoped to find: credit card statements, receipts, or something else that would reveal the extent of his betrayal. Inside a locked drawer, she stumbled upon a small velvet box. Her hands trembled as she opened it, expecting perhaps a gift meant for her. Instead, she found a diamond bracelet with a note addressed to "My darling Sabrina." That discovery confirmed the depth of his affair. He wasn't just having casual trysts. He was lavishing expensive gifts on his mistress, presumably with money tied to the business empire they had built together. Liz's hands shook with rage as she placed the bracelet back, her heart pounding with the resolution that she wouldn't let this go unpunished. Realizing she needed legal counsel, Liz confided in Rebecca once more. Rebecca recommended Heather Thompson, a well-respected attorney specializing in high-asset divorces. Heather had built a formidable reputation, representing celebrities and CEOs in tumultuous splits. When Liz entered Heather's tastefully decorated office in Century City, complete with glass walls, modern art and panoramic views, she felt both intimidated and hopeful. Heather listened patiently as Liz laid out the evidence of Jim's affair, describing how his deception and infidelity were poisoning the marriage. Heather took careful notes, occasionally asking questions about property assets, finances, and the timeline of the affair. She emphasized the importance of gathering all relevant documentation, including financial statements, to map out the best strategy. Liz hesitated as she placed a folder of photos and phone logs on Heather's desk. She'd never thought she'd need to wage a legal battle against the man she once adored. The reality that she was on the brink of a high-stakes divorce, something that could scandalize their social circles and tarnish the Harrington name, felt surreal. Yet beneath the sadness and disbelief, a cold flame of determination ignited. Jim would not get away with shattering her trust and jeopardizing everything they had built. Heather's initial assessment was straightforward, but daunting. "Given the assets involved, this will be a complex case," she said, her voice calm yet resolute. "We'll need to prove his infidelity beyond any doubt, and also establish that marital funds were used to support it." Heather explained that in California, where the community property rules applied, Liz was entitled to half of everything accumulated during the marriage, even more if Jim's misconduct could be shown to have financially harmed the marital estate. Liz's mind swirled. She had always been a supportive wife, never imagining she'd have to dissect every dollar her husband spent. However, Heather's words gave her a sense of empowerment. If Jim had plundered their shared resources to pamper Sabrina, he'd have to account for every dime. Though the prospect of a court battle loomed, Liz found a shred of solace in knowing that Heather was in her corner. They devised a plan. First, they would gather comprehensive financial records from Jim's numerous businesses and investments. Next, they'd prepare for possible mediation, though Heather warned that men like Jim rarely settled without a fight. Whatever happened, Liz would enter the battlefield armed with facts and a ruthless legal mind at her side. To strengthen her case, Liz dug into Jim's business affairs, investigating the real estate empire he had amassed. She'd been a silent partner in much of the enterprise, focusing instead on philanthropic efforts. Now she pored over every financial statement she could get her hands on. To her surprise, she uncovered suspicious transfers and unexplained expenses. Luxury dinners in exclusive restaurants, extravagant travel expenses not tied to business, and high-end jewelry purchases. A pattern emerged that pointed to lavish spending on someone outside their marital circle. Liz collated these findings in a spreadsheet, itemizing each questionable transaction. Every keystroke felt like a betrayal of her own memories, recalling the early days when she had so admired Jim for his business acumen. But if he had used their shared income to maintain a mistress, it was more than a personal betrayal. It was financial misconduct. At the same time, Liz faced emotional turmoil. Memories of their wedding day flooded her thoughts, the vows exchanged under an arch of white roses, the honeymoon in the Maldives, the quiet mornings spent sipping coffee while planning their future. Each recollection collided with the harsh present reality, fueling a swirl of grief and anger that galvanized her resolve. While Liz prepared her legal arsenal, Jim remained oblivious to her mounting retaliation. He still sauntered in late, offering lukewarm excuses that had begun to sound almost rehearsed. In his mind, Liz had always been passive, the doting wife who would never challenge him. If she asked pointed questions, he'd brush them off with a kiss on her forehead or a promise of a luxurious weekend getaway. But Liz no longer melted at his touch. She kept her composure, her eyes hardened with a newfound steely resolve that Jim failed to notice. At public events, she maintained the act of the supportive spouse, gritting her teeth as photographers captured their practiced smiles. The facade was exhausting, yet it served a purpose. Liz needed time and secrecy to build her case without alerting him to her intentions. One weekend, Jim claimed he had a business retreat in Napa Valley. Liz quickly checked his phone tracker. Sure enough, he was heading in the opposite direction, toward Santa Barbara, a romantic coastal town perfect for clandestine getaways. Liz refused to feel wounded this time. Instead, she waited for Andrew Garcia, the private investigator, to confirm that Jim was indeed with Sabrina. With each deception, Liz's quiet fury intensified. As Liz neared the point of no return, she also confided in her younger sister Charlotte, who lived in San Diego. Charlotte had always admired Liz's life of seeming perfection, her brilliant husband, her philanthropic work, her opulent home. Hearing about the affair left Charlotte stunned, but she rallied around her sister, offering emotional support and a comforting place to escape if needed. During a tearful weekend visit, Charlotte and Liz strolled along Coronado Beach, the waves lapping at their ankles as Liz recounted the painful details. Charlotte gently reminded her that a divorce, while tragic, could also be a chance for Liz to reclaim her life and pursue a new start. Liz realized she had become so wrapped up in Jim's shadow that she had lost her own identity. Their conversation illuminated a profound truth. Jim's betrayal had shaken Liz to her core, but perhaps it also represented an opportunity to rediscover who she was without him. Though the path ahead was uncertain, Liz felt a flicker of hope. She might emerge from this trial stronger, with newfound purpose and a clarity she had never before possessed. The showdown began to take shape when Heather Thompson arranged a meeting with Jim's lawyer, a seasoned litigator named Martin Lowell. Liz had never met him before but recognized the name from tabloid headlines. He had represented several Hollywood A-listers in messy divorces. The stakes were high. If Jim sensed Liz's intentions, he might move to hide assets or pressure her into a disadvantageous settlement. Before the meeting, Heather instructed Liz to maintain composure. "We're signaling our intent to negotiate, but this is also about showing we have the upper hand," Heather explained. "We have enough evidence that Jim can't simply dismiss us." The conference room at Heather's firm was all polished glass and chrome. Martin arrived looking smug, a leather briefcase in hand. Jim was conspicuously absent, claiming he had urgent business. Martin tried to downplay Jim's unavailability, but Heather wasted no time, laying out the documented proof: photos, credit card statements, phone records, gift receipts. Martin's smug expression faltered. He attempted to negotiate an informal arrangement, insisting that the affair was a temporary lapse. Heather firmly refused, stating that Liz deserved a formal settlement. Unnerved, Martin left with a promise to confer with Jim. Liz felt a wave of triumph. The first shot had been fired. Word of the imminent divorce slowly seeped into their social circles. Whispers circulated at charity galas and business mixers, but few knew the full story. Meanwhile, Liz prepared for the next step, filing the official divorce paperwork, citing irreconcilable differences and marital misconduct. She found it surreal to see her name on a legal document that would end the marriage she once believed unshakable. Jim learned about the filing from Martin. That evening, he burst into the mansion in a rage. "How dare you blindside me like this?" he bellowed. His eyes were filled with fury, but beneath it, Liz detected fear. She remained calm, crossing her arms protectively. "I know everything, Jim," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I know about Sabrina. I know about the money you spent on her. I know you've been lying to me for months, maybe years." His fury subsided into something colder. He insisted it was all a misunderstanding, that Sabrina was just a business acquaintance. But the evidence Liz had gathered rendered his denials laughable. When he realized there was no bluff, his tone shifted to bargaining, promising to end the affair, to cut all ties with Sabrina. Yet Liz stood firm. The harm was done, the trust shattered. Despite Jim's shock, he tried to salvage his pride. Over the next few days, he inundated Liz with flowers and tearful pleas. He argued that their public image would be ruined, that investors might pull out of his real estate deals if news of the divorce got ugly. He cited potential damage to Liz's philanthropic efforts, claiming donors would lose confidence in the Harrington Foundation. Liz, though torn, refused to relent. She admitted that part of her still clung to the love they once shared, but she could no longer stomach living a lie. "If you truly care about the foundation, then spare me the theatrics and settle this fairly," she told him during one of his pleas. Unwilling to relinquish control, Jim threatened to expose personal details about her. He reminded her of a past fling she'd had years before they were married, twisting the narrative to paint her as equally unfaithful. The attempt was weak, given there was no overlap with their marriage, but it fueled Liz's determination. She would not be intimidated by his attempts at character assassination. Instead, she pressed Heather to move swiftly, seeking temporary spousal support and immediate disclosure of all financial documents. Heather's legal maneuvering worked. The court granted temporary spousal support and ordered Jim to produce comprehensive records within a specified time frame. As the process advanced, new details emerged about the extent of his financial entanglements with Sabrina. He had leased her a stylish apartment in West Hollywood, paid for her luxury car, and even funded a designer wardrobe, all charged to corporate accounts under vague marketing expenses. Outraged, Liz recognized this wasn't just about heartbreak, it was about justice and standing up for herself. She also considered how publicizing Jim's misconduct might impact their philanthropic work. Yet she realized that continuing to feign the role of a harmonious couple would make her complicit in a lie. She resolved that if the foundation took a hit, it would be a necessary sacrifice. Meanwhile, the tension at home was unbearable. Jim would retire to the guest room, sulking or launching verbal attacks. The staff tiptoed around them, aware that something was drastically wrong. Liz stayed mostly in her own quarters, focusing on the legal strategy. Whenever she felt overwhelmed, she reminded herself of the love she once had for Jim, and how that man no longer existed. As the divorce proceedings escalated into a legal maelstrom, Sabrina Delgado, once content to remain on the fringes, began making her presence more conspicuous with each passing day. She filled her social media feeds with snapshots of lavish handbags and decadent jewelry, posting cryptic captions about soulmates and finding happiness against all odds. These posts quickly circulated among Liz's friends, who forwarded screenshot after screenshot, each one deepening Liz's sense of outrage. Sabrina never mentioned Jim by name, but to anyone even remotely familiar with their social circle, her unsubtle hints were impossible to miss. Before long, the rumor mill kicked into overdrive. Speculation ran rampant. Some whispered that Sabrina was pressuring Jim to finalize the divorce so they could wed in a grand ceremony of their own. Others claimed she had grown weary of playing second fiddle and threatened to go public if Jim didn't commit to her fully. Tabloids caught wind of the brewing scandal, splashing sensational headlines about the Harrington marriage crisis across celebrity news websites. A few publications even dug up old photos of Liz and Jim at happier times, juxtaposing them with Sabrina's flashy social media posts, turning the whole affair into a twisted soap opera for the public's consumption. For Liz, every new rumor or paparazzi snapshot felt like a stinging personal affront. Yet, paradoxically, the relentless wave of public humiliation only fortified her resolve. She leaned on Rebecca, Charlotte, and Heather for support, both emotional and strategic, determined not to let Sabrina's taunts derail her pursuit of justice. The brazen display of Sabrina's wealth and status, funded with Jim's overt and likely illicit generosity, made it abundantly clear. Liz's marriage to Jim was irreparably tainted. Choosing to walk away wasn't merely an act of self-preservation. It was a vital reclamation of her dignity. Discovery sessions in the legal arena became an extended test of Liz's resolve, each day feeling like a high-stakes chess match under unforgiving fluorescent courthouse lights. Jim's legal team resorted to an array of delay tactics. They filed endless motions to postpone, claimed key financial documents were misplaced, and even tried to label Liz as a scheming gold digger who had only married Jim for his immense wealth. It was a ruthless, calculated campaign to paint Liz as undeserving and frivolous, hoping to pressure her into accepting a reduced settlement or dropping the case altogether. Heather, however, was equal to the challenge. She responded to every maneuver with measured precision, filing counter-motions and calmly producing evidence that undermined Jim's claims. In particular, Heather brandished tax returns and bank statements, proving that Liz had not only contributed personal funds to certain investments, but had also been instrumental in organizing high-profile philanthropic events, establishing her as far more than a mere beneficiary of Jim's empire. Each day, Liz would arrive at the courthouse impeccably dressed, her posture unwavering despite an undercurrent of nerves. Yet the constant back and forth took a visible toll on her spirit. Presiding over the proceedings was the Honorable Susan Berkowitz, a no-nonsense judge with a reputation for cutting through theatrics. Time and again, she admonished Jim's lawyers for their evasive maneuvers, insisting they produce requested documents without further delay. One afternoon, as Liz stepped onto the courthouse steps, she caught sight of Sabrina Delgado lingering near the entrance, hiding behind large sunglasses. Their gazes locked for a moment, a flash of mutual recognition that sent Liz's stomach lurching. A strange pang of pity flickered within her. Sabrina, after all, was merely another pawn in Jim's elaborate game. Without a word, Liz turned away and kept walking, resolute in her focus on the larger battle she needed to win. In a decisive move to leave no stone unturned, Heather petitioned the court for a forensic audit of all Jim's business dealings and financial accounts. The task fell to Philip Rosen, a seasoned accountant known for his meticulous attention to detail and his history of uncovering hidden assets in high-profile divorce cases. Almost immediately, Rosen's preliminary report yielded startling information. Jim had been quietly funneling funds into several obscure shell companies, entities that had been set up with names so nondescript they attracted little initial scrutiny. If Rosen's findings proved accurate and intentional, Jim could be facing accusations of fraud, along with hefty legal penalties. When Liz first heard the news, she was torn between anger and sorrow. Memories flooded her mind of how Jim used to tout his supposed honest rise to the top, regaling her with stories of business ethics and self-made success. Now, those memories felt like bitter illusions, each revelation chipping away at the shiny facade he had so carefully cultivated. No longer was he just the unfaithful husband. He was a man willing to break the law to maintain his lifestyle and shield his mistress from financial scrutiny. Despite this mounting evidence of wrongdoing, Jim refused to acknowledge any fault, doubling down on his public persona with grandiose plans for a lavish charity gala at their home. This event, he argued, would bolster confidence among investors and donors, reassuring them of the Harrington name's enduring prestige. Although Liz cringed at the very thought of hosting such a spectacle, she agreed, sensing an opportunity to appear composed and unshaken by the scandal. Yet even as teams of caterers and florists transformed the mansion's vast rooms into a glitzy paradise, the undercurrent of tension was palpable. Every seemingly joyous detail, from the sumptuous floral arrangements to the orchestral ensemble, served as a glossy veneer, barely concealing the turmoil simmering just beneath the surface. On the evening of the highly anticipated charity event, a fleet of black limousines and luxury SUVs formed a queue at the gates of the Harrington mansion, depositing an endless stream of elegantly dressed guests onto a red carpet that gleamed under soft, carefully positioned lighting. Cameramen and photographers from prominent tabloids and fashion magazines hovered nearby, capturing every gown, jewel, and practiced smile. Inside, the mansion itself had been transformed into a realm of delicate opulence. Towering flower arrangements perfumed the air, mingling with the crisp scent of ice sculptures carved into graceful shapes. A string quartet, positioned on a small stage by the grand staircase, played classical pieces that drifted through the corridors, setting a refined yet lively atmosphere. Against this glamorous backdrop, Jim swept through the crowd with polished charisma. He greeted top-tier donors and corporate magnates, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries as though he hadn't a care in the world. Liz, in a sleek silver gown that complemented the mansion's shimmering decor, dutifully took on the role of poised hostess, She welcomed celebrities with a poised smile, actors, socialites, and tech gurus, graciously steering small talk away from personal topics. Yet a subtle tension lingered beneath the surface. Whispers of the couple's rumored marital strife had begun circulating in hushed corners, prompting a few daring reporters to approach Liz for clarification. Each time she deflected politely, offering variations of the same line. "We're here to support a wonderful cause tonight." Her eyes, however, betrayed an undercurrent of distress to those who knew her well. The illusion of composure was tested the moment Liz spotted Sabrina Delgado at the bar wearing a scandalously fitted red dress. Sabrina's presence radiated brazen confidence, an unmistakable challenge to Liz. Upon noticing Liz's gaze, Sabrina smiled thinly and raised her champagne flute in a silent, mocking salute. Liz felt a flash of fury burn in her cheeks, but with every ounce of willpower, she forced herself to remain calm and collected. It was clear that Jim had permitted this shameless display, perhaps as a twisted power play to demonstrate his control. Despite the swirl of exquisite fashion, sparkling chandeliers and murmured compliments, a sense of brewing chaos undercut the evening's grandeur, making Liz more certain than ever that the cracks in her marriage had widened into a chasm no veneer of luxury could hide. Eventually, Jim took center stage in the grand ballroom to deliver what was billed as the evening's keynote address. From her vantage point near a pillar draped in white orchids, Liz watched him step into the spotlight with practiced ease. He spoke about generosity and compassion, extolling the virtues of giving back to the community, words that landed with a hollow thud on Liz's ears. Her gaze flickered to the audience, influential donors, socialites, and a smattering of paparazzi who had managed to slip in, all engrossed in Jim's performance. The air was thick with expensive perfume and anticipation, punctuated by bursts of polite laughter whenever Jim attempted a light-hearted anecdote. Suddenly, he called Liz to join him. Applause rippled through the crowd, cameras flashing as she reluctantly made her way to the front. Each step felt like walking on shards of glass, every muscle in her body tensed. Forcing a stiff smile, she stood by his side as he praised her dedication to philanthropy, cradling her waist for the photographers. In that moment, Liz felt less like a devoted partner and more like a prop in Jim's meticulously orchestrated show. When the applause died down, Jim leaned in, his voice a hushed whisper brimming with forced intimacy. "We can still fix this," he murmured, his warm breath against her ear sending a shiver of revulsion through her. Despite the lights and cameras, she found a shard of courage. "Don't pretend to care," she answered, her voice quietly firm. The flicker of anger in his eyes was visible only to her, but a few guests in the front rows noticed the tension, exchanging puzzled glances. As the evening pressed on, Liz resumed her hostess duties, greeting guests with the bare minimum of polite conversation. Even so, she felt her patience fraying with each passing minute. At one point, she caught sight of Sabrina hovering near the buffet table, looking perfectly composed in a crimson dress that caught every eye in the room. The audacity of that moment, her husband's mistress mingling among their high society guests, made Liz's stomach twist in anger and disgust. The moment Liz could discreetly slip away, she escaped to her private dressing area tucked behind the ballroom. There she locked the door and let out a shaky breath. Her reflection in the ornate mirror showed a poised woman in a dazzling gown, but her eyes brimmed with unshed tears, betraying the storm of heartbreak and humiliation beneath the surface. Placing a hand over her racing heart, she whispered to herself, "Soon, this will be over." And in that quiet, solitary moment, she vowed that no amount of wealth, social prestige, or staged public appearances would ever again force her to play a role in Jim's lavish illusions. The aftermath of the charity event was rife with gossip. Social media posts dissected every detail: Jim's forced smiles, Liz's distant demeanor, Sabrina's eye-catching outfit. While some tabloids speculated that Liz was close to reconciling with Jim, others suggested a bitter divorce was imminent. Behind the scenes, Heather and the forensic accountant continued to uncover evidence of Jim's efforts to conceal assets. The judge ordered Jim to provide additional documentation, and each new record illuminated more discrepancies. In an attempt to silence Liz and settle quickly, Jim's legal team made an offer, a lump sum payment in exchange for her signing a non-disclosure agreement. Liz rejected the proposal without a second thought. She wouldn't be bought into silence. Accepting that deal would mean letting Jim walk away unscathed, free to manipulate and betray again. She wanted a fair, honest settlement. Moreover, Liz felt it was essential to expose the truth, especially after discovering how Jim's shell companies had siphoned funds potentially earmarked for charitable causes. The rejection infuriated Jim, who confronted Liz in the hallway of their mansion. His voice rose, calling her ungrateful and vindictive. But Liz no longer cowered. She met his gaze with unwavering resolve, declaring, "You brought this on yourself." With the trial date looming ever closer, the atmosphere around the Harrington estate grew increasingly tense. Jim's once glamorous world began to crumble under the intense scrutiny of the forensic audit. Subtle rumors spread like wildfire among Los Angeles's elite circles, causing his business partners to reassess their ties with him. Potential investors, once dazzled by the Harrington name, started pulling out of major real estate deals, terrified of being caught in the crossfire of looming litigation. Even Sabrina sensed the darkening horizon. Her once frequent social media posts flaunting opulent gifts and grand getaways all but vanished, replaced by sporadic updates that were notably more guarded and cryptic. Late one evening, Heather convened a crucial strategy meeting at her office. The city's skyline twinkled through the tall windows, a stark contrast to the seriousness of the discussion unfolding within. She laid out the latest forensic findings, indisputable proof of Jim's unscrupulous financial maneuvers, bolstered by solid evidence of his indiscretions with Sabrina. "This could shift the entire settlement in our favor," Heather remarked, her tone resolute yet cautious. She warned Liz, however, that Jim's attorneys would not hesitate to drag her reputation through the mud, dredging up anything, from distant family drama to trivial youthful mistakes, to paint Liz as a manipulative gold digger. Liz listened, her nerves tingling with both fear and a strange burgeoning strength. She braced herself for the possibility of having her privacy invaded in ways she never imagined. Yet in that moment, she recognized her own transformation. The demure wife who once accepted Jim's decisions without question was gone, replaced by a determined woman unwilling to be intimidated. Although a swirl of dread kept her awake at night, Liz also felt a sense of liberation rising within. She resolved to face the courtroom head-on, prepared to see this battle through to a fair and just conclusion. The trial began on a sunny Monday morning in a downtown Los Angeles courthouse. Media trucks lined the streets, their satellites pointed skyward. Paparazzi snapped photos of Liz stepping out of a black SUV, dressed in a conservative navy suit, her chin held high. Jim arrived moments later, flanked by Martin Lowell and a small entourage. He appeared tense, shooting icy glares in Liz's direction. Inside the courtroom, Judge Berkowitz presided with an air of stern efficiency. The proceedings commenced with opening arguments. Heather painted a picture of a wife deceived, a marriage undermined by a flagrant affair, and marital assets misused. Martin fired back, suggesting Liz was opportunistically inflating the affair to gain more money, accusing her of being aware and complicit in many of the finances. Witnesses were called. Andrew Garcia, the private investigator, testified to his surveillance. Philip Rosen detailed the hidden accounts. Even staff from Jim's companies took the stand, confirming the lavish expenditures made in Sabrina's name. Each revelation struck like a thunderclap in the courtroom, weaving a damning narrative of Jim's betrayal. Liz's stomach clenched when Sabrina herself was called, but her testimony only underscored Jim's duplicity. During her turn on the stand, Liz felt her pulse racing. She answered questions about her life with Jim, how they met, their philanthropic endeavors, and the gradual unraveling of trust. When Martin tried to corner her with pointed questions about her ambitions, she remained composed, explaining how she had supported Jim's empire and never once anticipated profiting from his downfall. Jim's testimony was fraught with contradictions. At times, he downplayed his relationship with Sabrina, calling it a casual mistake, but soon enough, evidence showed lavish gifts and monthly allowances. He denied creating shell companies to hide assets, only to be confronted with records bearing his signatures. The courtroom atmosphere grew tense as Martin struggled to defend a case riddled with holes. After days of witness testimonies and cross-examinations, both sides presented their closing arguments. Heather emphasized the betrayal's emotional and financial toll on Liz, urging the court for a fair and decisive settlement. Martin tried to salvage Jim's reputation, contending that his mistakes should not lead to an unjust overreach in Liz's favor. With arguments concluded, Judge Berkowitz announced she would review the evidence and reconvene in a week to deliver her verdict. The week leading up to the verdict felt like an eternity for Liz. Each morning she woke with a knot of anxiety in her stomach, unable to escape the steady countdown to the final judgment that would define her future. Though her close friends and her sister, Charlotte, assured her that the evidence weighed heavily in her favor, Liz couldn't quell the lingering fear that something might go awry in court. She kept busy by volunteering at a local community shelter, serving meals and offering words of comfort to people going through hardships, an act that, in many ways, mirrored her own sense of fighting for a better tomorrow. Even so, her mind often drifted back to images of the courtroom, where her past and present collided in a swirl of legal documents and emotional turmoil. At last, the day arrived, warm sunshine blanketing downtown Los Angeles as Liz stepped out of her car and approached the courthouse. Media vans lined the street, reporters jockeying for position, while curious onlookers whispered and pointed at the soon-to-be ex-wife of a millionaire mogul. With her head held high, Liz entered the building, determined to see this through. Once inside, the air in the courtroom crackled with anticipation. Judge Berkowitz took her seat, glancing over her paperwork before delivering a carefully measured, detailed judgment. The decision was unequivocal. Jim's affair, coupled with his financial deception, entitled Liz to a substantial portion of their communal assets. The judge also ordered Jim to repay any marital funds diverted to Sabrina, ensuring their once-shared philanthropic commitments would remain intact. Liz listened, heart pounding, tears threatening to spill as she absorbed the weight of the verdict. By the time the gavel struck its final note, she felt a calm resolve settle over her, a mix of relief and vindication. Beyond the courthouse doors, cameras flashed and reporters pressed forward with questions, but Liz walked past them, her gaze set on the horizon of her new life, finally free from the shadows of betrayal. Emerging from the courthouse, Liz felt a rush of emotions. Triumph, sorrow, liberation, and exhaustion all at once. She spotted Heather nearby, who gave her a supportive nod. There would be challenges ahead, rebuilding her life, sorting through the final divisions of property, and deciding her new path. But in that moment, Liz felt something she hadn't experienced in months, the lightness of being free from Jim's deceit. Over the following months, Liz focused on healing. She dedicated more time to her philanthropic work, rebranding the Harrington Foundation under a new name, the Elizabeth Foundation, signaling a fresh chapter. Surrounded by the unwavering support of her loved ones, she found renewed purpose in expanding charitable programs, particularly for women recovering from abusive relationships or financial hardships. As for Jim, rumors swirled that his business faltered, with partners cutting ties due to the negative press. Sabrina Delgado all but vanished from the public eye, rumored to have moved out of state. Liz never looked back. She had survived one of the darkest chapters of her life, and in doing so, discovered her own resilience and independence. In the end, the millionaire husband who cheated found himself paying the ultimate price, not just financially, but in the loss of respect, admiration, and trust he once took for granted. Meanwhile, Liz rose from the ashes, stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the life she deserved. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey of heartbreak, resilience, and ultimate triumph. The story of Elizabeth Harrington reminds us that even the most glamorous relationships can hide painful secrets, and that sometimes the only way to find true freedom is to confront our deepest fears. Liz's unwavering determination in the face of betrayal serves as a powerful lesson on the importance of self-worth, standing up for one's rights, and never underestimating the power of a strong legal strategy and a supportive community.
Millionaire buys mistress luxury gifts. With pregnant wife's money, wife makes them both pay publicly. They were the couple everyone envied, wealthy, beautiful, and expecting their first child. The world saw Oliver and Charlene Cooper as the epitome of success, smiling at galas and making heartfelt speeches about family. Behind the scenes, however, a burning secret threatened to tear their carefully curated lives apart. Charlene's joy at soon becoming a mother was overshadowed by one devastating discovery. The luxury gifts her husband showered upon an elusive mistress were paid for with Charlene's own inheritance. Betrayal and scandal ignited a storm, and Charlene was prepared to fight back. But would she dare to expose Oliver, no matter the cost? Charlene Cooper was not just a socialite, she was the heiress to the Wilkerson real estate empire lineage that had solid footing in San Diego's property development sector for over 6 decades. The Wilkerson name was synonymous with old money, refined taste, and philanthropic work that spanned across California. Growing up, Charlene rarely heard a no. Her father, George Wilkerson, had doted on her, granting every request with a smile. Yet despite that gilded upbringing, Charlene carried a soft heart and a genuine desire to do good. When she met Oliver Cooper at a charity event in Los Angeles, their romance played out like a fairy tale. Oliver was a self-made businessman, known for an athletic build that hinted at his college football days and a confident smile that made him an instant crowd favorite. He had built a modest tech startup into a multi-million-dollar operation, impressing the city's financial elite. They fell in love fast, too fast, according to some cynics. But for Charlene, who believed in grand gestures and cosmic connections, their whirlwind engagement and wedding felt like destiny. Marriage brought new joys and new pressures. Charlene found out she was pregnant 6 months into their union. While Oliver celebrated the news publicly, calling himself the luckiest man on earth, Charlene began to notice subtle shifts in his demeanor. He worked later hours, made strange phone calls from the balcony, and sometimes disappeared for business trips on painfully short notice. Charlene's close friend, Laura S. Wilkerson, a distant cousin who had married into another wealthy family, tried warning her that something felt off. But Charlene didn't want to believe Laura's suspicions. Not Oliver, her dream man, the one who had vowed to protect and cherish her. He couldn't possibly betray her. Yet tiny fractures were starting to form. On the day Charlene's pregnancy test came back positive, Oliver had seemed distracted. The typical euphoria of an expecting father lasted mere hours before he slipped out for a supposed investor meeting. Over the next weeks, she saw less of him than ever. The staff at their Beverly Hills mansion began whispering behind her back. Charlene wasn't oblivious. She was heartbroken, but too afraid of the truth to dig deeper. It was her father's unexpected passing that truly opened her eyes. George Wilkerson's death left Charlene with a sizable inheritance, enough for Oliver to realize that Charlene's pockets were even deeper than he had initially understood. Charlene, unaware of the lurking vultures, told Oliver she had come into a great deal of wealth. She wanted to donate a portion to a charity that supported homeless pregnant women, but Oliver suggested they wait to ensure stable cash flow for upcoming expansions. It sounded wise at the time, so Charlene agreed to hold off her philanthropic dream. Still, something nagged at her. She discovered unread emails, unaccounted for expenses, and hush-hush charges on their joint account labeled under consultancy fees. Worst of all, she found receipts from high-end boutiques like Hermes and Cartier, extravagant purchases that she had no memory of, and certainly had never received. The final straw came when an alert from her bank informed her that an enormous amount had been withdrawn to pay for a penthouse lease in downtown Los Angeles. This transaction screamed secrecy, and Charlene's entire body trembled with dread. In the quiet hours of early morning, as she felt her unborn child gently kick within her, Charlene realized she could no longer turn a blind eye. She had to uncover the truth, even if it shattered her heart and destroyed the man she once believed was her soulmate. In the days following her discovery, Charlene felt like an actress in a film noir, her every step cautious, her every smile forced. She needed answers, but she couldn't just walk up to Oliver and accuse him blindly. Instead, she decided to use the resources at her disposal. She hired a private investigator named Jackson Miller, a discreet figure with an impeccable reputation for uncovering hidden truths among Los Angeles' high-profile elite. Jackson, with his salt and pepper stubble and calm, analytical demeanor, met her at a quiet cafe in Westwood. They spoke in hushed tones as Charlene handed him the suspicious receipts and transaction records. He asked pointed questions about Oliver's habits, the times he'd come home late, any known associates he might confide in. Charlene listened to Jackson's methodology, a plan to track Oliver's movements, record his financial dealings, and dig into phone logs if necessary. Days turned into a week. Charlene stayed up at night, mind racing, imagining the worst possible scenarios. She told herself she might be overreacting, clinging to a slim hope that the transactions were for something innocuous, secret anniversary plans, perhaps. Yet her instincts told her otherwise. When Jackson finally called, Charlene's heart nearly stopped. Meeting him again at the same cafe, she arrived early, nerves buzzing. Jackson sat across from her, an empathy in his eyes that made her realize he'd done this many times before. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were photographs of Oliver walking hand in hand with a striking brunette outside an exclusive boutique on Rodeo Drive. Another set of photos showed them picking out jewelry, with Oliver's arm confidently wrapped around the woman's waist. "She's Alexis Hart," Jackson said quietly, "a former runway model turned social media influencer. She has some moderate fame in the LA scene. She's known for her lavish lifestyle, usually financed by older, wealthy benefactors." Charlene's hands shook as she gripped the photos. The heartbreak was swift and brutal. She recognized the haute couture store in the background, places Oliver had never even invited her to. "There's more," Jackson added gently. "I discovered that the penthouse in downtown LA is in her name, but the payment route traces back to your inheritance account. I'm sorry. It was one thing to suspect a betrayal. It was another to see it displayed in undeniable proof. The pictures, the receipts, the joint property lease. Oliver was not just cheating on Charlene. He was using her father's money to do it. She felt her breath hitch, tears threatening to escape, but she forced them down. Charlene asked Jackson for everything: receipts, photos, timestamps. She paid him extra to collect any digital evidence he could find, from text messages to bank statements. If she was going to confront Oliver, she wanted an unassailable arsenal of facts. As she left the cafe, Charlene thought about her unborn child, the life forming within her. She recalled the day she had told Oliver the news. He had seemed so excited, so genuinely happy, yet how quickly that joy was overshadowed by this shameless affair. She realized she was no longer just a spurned wife. She was about to be a mother, and everything in her screamed that she had to protect her child from the toxic lies. Oliver brought into their home. That evening, Oliver returned late again. Charlene feigned sleep, carefully controlling her breathing so he wouldn't notice her tears or the heartache searing through her. As he tucked himself into bed, she felt the mattress shift with his weight, a weight that now felt heavier than ever. Deep inside, a new resolve began to form. Charlene would do whatever it took to ensure that justice was served, and she wasn't afraid to make it public if need be. Each passing day, the tension in the Cooper household intensified. Oliver acted more brazenly, sending text messages in Charlene's presence, stepping out for phone calls he labeled as urgent investor matters. A lesser woman might have confronted him immediately, brandishing evidence. But Charlene was no novice to power plays and feuds. She had observed enough corporate tussles in her father's company to know that timing was everything. In her father's study, a room lined with leather-bound books and old trophies, Charlene prepared her own strategy. Late one night, she laid out the evidence Jackson had collected, timelines, photos, and the sickening bank statements. She studied them like a general planning for war. She made sure to store duplicates safely with Laura Wilkerson, her trusted cousin, in case Oliver discovered her plans. Ironically, Oliver's behavior grew kinder during the day, as though he sensed her withdrawal. He started bringing her roses in an attempt to mask his guilt, or maybe to maintain the facade. He accompanied her to a routine prenatal checkup for the first time in weeks, acting every bit the devoted husband. The nurses at the clinic cooed over how lucky Charlene was to have such a supportive partner. The bitterness in her throat made it hard to swallow. One evening, Oliver suggested they dine at Spago in Beverly Hills, a place they often frequented during their courtship. Charlene agreed, thinking it might provide an opportunity to gauge his reactions. The hush of the Michelin-starred restaurant, the attentive waitstaff, and the candle-lit ambiance all felt dreamlike. But beneath the surface, Charlene's anger simmered. Over foie gras and a meticulously prepared lamb dish, Oliver tried to discuss baby names. Charlene forced a smile, swirling her sparkling water while he sipped a vintage red. She asked him if everything was all right at work, if finances were stable. Oliver hesitated, quickly reassuring her that his tech ventures were thriving. "So we're still set on donating to that shelter project, right?" Charlene ventured, referencing her desire to support homeless, pregnant women. He coughed, face tight. "Yes, of course, but let's hold off until next quarter. I just need to ensure certain expansions go through." Charlene simply nodded, absorbing this new wave of deception. Her father's inheritance was being siphoned for Alexis Hart's penthouse and expensive tastes, yet Oliver continued to manipulate her philanthropic dreams. Back home, he went straight to shower, leaving his phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. Charlene's heart pounded. She told herself she wasn't the type to invade privacy, but the truth was already out there. She was dealing with a man who had no qualms betraying her. Nerves tense, she picked up the phone, scrolling through messages. Most were harmless business chats, but one thread stood out: Alexis. She opened it, scanning a conversation that made her stomach twist. Alexis bragged about their penthouse, how the city view from the balcony at dawn was worth every cent, how she'd love a new Chanel bag to match the latest couture she'd posted on Instagram. Oliver's replies were full of heart emojis and promises to fulfill her every desire. A wave of nausea overtook Charlene, more intense than any pregnancy sickness she'd felt before. She barely managed to exit the screen and place the phone back before Oliver emerged. He kissed her on the cheek, his lips cold to her now. All she could do was force a painfully fake smile and wait for the next move. That night, sleep evaded her. Memories of happier times replayed in her mind, their honeymoon in Bora Bora, dancing under the stars at a friend's wedding, the day. Oliver surprised her with breakfast in bed just to see her smile. She clung to these fleeting good memories, mourning the reality that such love was probably never real to begin with. But she also felt the shift in her soul. The heartbreak was solidifying into anger, and the anger was transforming into an unwavering resolve. Charlene knew that if Oliver had the audacity to use her money to fund his mistress's lavish lifestyle, she owed it to her father's legacy and to herself to make them both pay, and not quietly. A few days later, Charlene found herself staring at Alexis Hart's social media profiles. The woman was stunning tall, with an enviable figure, sultry green eyes, and perfectly styled brunette waves. Her Instagram feed was a curated display of luxury, private jets, high-end restaurants, and designer clothes from Paris. She had close to 1 million followers, drawn to her constant parade of opulence and aspirational living. Charlene felt a cold detachment as she clicked through pictures of Alexis flaunting the diamond necklace Oliver had purchased. She recognized it from the receipts. A brand new photo had Alexis perched on a velvet chair inside the downtown penthouse. The skyline behind her, the caption read, "Home, sweet home, filled with love and endless possibilities." She scrolled through comments from adoring fans, many praising her glamorous lifestyle and inspirational success. The irony was nauseating. Charlene thought of the heartbreak behind those shimmering surfaces, the lies fueling Alexis's brand. Charlene's father's money that was meant to be used for philanthropic work was going straight into Alexis's pockets. Deciding to gather more intel, Charlene used a fake social media account to follow Alexis's stories. She was stunned to see a recurring cameo, Oliver's hand, the same gold watch she had given him on their wedding day. Sometimes Alexis's live videos captured the muffled sound of Oliver's voice in the background. They thought they were being subtle, but for Charlene, it was a direct punch to the gut. Shortly after, Charlene discovered that Alexis was scheduled to attend a fashion event in downtown Los Angeles. It wasn't a massive public show, more a private preview for wealthy potential buyers. Charlene secured an invite through a friend, deciding it was time to see Alexis in person. The event was held in a swanky gallery, lights dimmed to highlight the models gliding down a makeshift runway. Charlene arrived in a classic black sheath dress that hugged her small baby bump discreetly. Despite her turmoil, she emanated poise, her posture straight, her chin held high. She spotted Alexis near the front row, surrounded by admirers. The mistress was elegantly dressed in a gold sequined gown, accessorized with the exact diamond necklace Charlene had seen on Instagram. Her laugh tinkled through the air as she relished the attention. Charlene approached cautiously, not wanting to cause a scene. She pretended to admire a piece of couture on display until she was near enough to hear Alexis's conversation with a friend. They gossiped about men, parties, and brand sponsorships. Alexis boasted about how her man was more generous than any sponsor she had ever encountered. Charlene's stomach twisted in revulsion, but she maintained her composure. One glance at Alexis's face, and Charlene felt an overwhelming wave of empathy for herself, for the unborn baby, for the life she had believed in. Alexis, for all her glamorous facade, seemed cunning, but not necessarily formidable. She was a symptom, not the root cause. Charlene's ire was saved mostly for Oliver, the man who had orchestrated this entire betrayal. Still, Alexis wasn't innocent. She was knowingly involved with a married man, and even flaunting the spoils of that affair. Before Charlene turned to leave, Alexis's gaze slid over her. Their eyes locked for a moment. Alexis gave Charlene a fleeting glance, perhaps seeing her as another wealthy guest, and then looked away without a hint of recognition. There was a moment's temptation for Charlene to walk up and introduce herself as Oliver's pregnant wife, but she resisted. She had bigger plans. A public meltdown at a fashion event might have satisfied a lesser impulse, but Charlene needed a carefully crafted retribution, one that would leave both Oliver and Alexis reeling in the most public way possible. When Charlene stepped out into the brisk night air, she felt the baby kick. A soothing wave of maternal protectiveness coursed through her. "Don't worry," she whispered softly, placing a gentle hand on her belly. "Mummy's got this." Fueled by the injustices she'd discovered, Charlene began assembling a legal and social strategy. She reached out to her late father's trusted attorney, Deborah T. Carmichael, an older woman whose steely gaze and impeccable knowledge of the law had guided the Wilkerson family through countless high-stakes disputes. Sitting in Deborah's glass-walled office, Charlene laid out the situation. Deborah, with her silver hair pulled into a neat chignon, listened intently, occasionally leaning forward to examine the evidence Charlene provided. After a lengthy pause, she said, "We have grounds for a significant lawsuit, embezzlement of inheritance funds, possible misappropriation, the list goes on. But Charlene, you need to be ready for a brutal fight. Oliver might not back down easily, and your personal life will be under public scrutiny." Charlene took a deep breath, feeling a tremor course through her. "I need to do this, Deborah. I won't let him or that woman continue to siphon off what my father left behind. And I need to protect my baby." Deborah nodded, taking down notes. "We'll move forward carefully. I'll assemble a forensic accounting team. In the meantime, you need to keep a low profile, act like everything is normal at home. We don't want him suspecting we're onto him yet. Once we have a solid case, we'll confront him with it." Legal measures were only part of Charlene's plan. She had a more personal vendetta. She wanted Oliver and Alexis to face the consequences on a social platform. After all, Oliver thrived on maintaining a polished public image as a philanthropic millionaire, and Alexis, her entire career hinged on her glamorous, envy-inducing social media persona. Charlene resolved to strike them where it would hurt the most, in public reputation. A stroke of inspiration led Charlene to her father's old diaries, which she discovered tucked away in a carved mahogany chest. George Wilkerson had meticulously recorded notes about people he did business with, favors, secrets, alliances. Reading through them, Charlene was reminded how alliances could be forged or broken with a single phone call. She discovered a longtime ally of her father's, Mark Remington, a prominent journalist with the Los Angeles Tribune. Mark and George had teamed up once to expose a crooked real estate mogul. The subsequent scandal had garnered front-page headlines, and Mark owed his career boost to George. Charlene wasn't sure if Mark would remember her, but she decided to find out. She called the Tribune, leaving a message explaining that she was George Wilkerson's daughter and needed to speak with Mark. Within an hour, she got a call back. Mark's voice was warm with reminiscence as he recounted how much her father had supported him. After exchanging pleasantries, Charlene offered Mark an exclusive story that would expose betrayal, financial misuse, and the lavish downfall of a prominent tech millionaire. Mark hesitated. "This is about Oliver Cooper, isn't it? I've seen him around, and he's something of a rising star in the business section. Are you certain you want to go public?" Charlene's throat tightened. "I'm certain, but I need your promise that this will be handled with integrity. This isn't just gossip, it's about justice and ensuring no one else gets hurt." Mark agreed to meet in person, requesting a time and place. They settled on a discreet cafe near the Tribune's office. As Charlene hung up, she felt a surge of adrenaline. It was one thing to plan revenge quietly, but quite another to involve a well-known journalist who had the power to break a career. In those days of preparatory hush, Charlene found small comfort in her unborn child's growing kicks. She allowed herself moments of calm, sometimes drifting to the nursery she had started decorating. She would stand there in the soft glow of pastel paint, letting her imagination wander to a future free from Oliver's deceit. Yet every time she saw Oliver, her resolve hardened. One late night, she heard him chatting on the phone in hushed tones, finishing with "I miss you too," before ending the call. The next morning, he cheerfully asked if she needed anything for her prenatal vitamins. The audacity left her speechless, but it also reaffirmed her mission. She would not remain a helpless victim. Oliver Cooper was not a man who ever considered himself the villain. Born to modest means in Sacramento, he had clawed his way up, starting with a partial football scholarship that got him through college. When an injury ended his sports dreams, he discovered a knack for sales and networking. He joined a tech startup, impressing investors with his bold pitches and near-fearless approach. Over time, he built his own enterprise, Cooper Innovations, attracting venture capital, forging partnerships, and eventually becoming a darling of the tech press. He prided himself on defying expectations. To Oliver, life was a game of strategy, and he believed that moral lines were negotiable if the end justified the means. Meeting Charlene Wilkerson seemed like the perfect alignment of business and pleasure. He was genuinely drawn to her kindness and sophistication, but he was also captivated by the resources she possessed. Their relationship skyrocketed his social standing. Her father's connections opened doors that would have remained locked for years. However, Oliver's appetite for success proved insatiable. He was enthralled by the power he wielded and the attention he could command, especially from women who admired his status. The day he set eyes on Alexis Hart at a high-end nightclub, desire and opportunity collided. He was bored with the predictability of marriage, or so he told himself, and Alexis represented the spark he craved. But Alexis demanded more than mere attention. She wanted designer bags, exclusive penthouse living, and the feeling of being kept by a wealthy lover. Initially, Oliver believed he could handle the financial burden. His ventures were doing well, after all. But soon, Alexis's cravings escalated. She wanted a place bigger than her old condo. She wanted jewelry that would stand out on her Instagram feed. Oliver found ways to sneak money out of joint accounts, forging invoices and funneling funds. When the news of Charlene's inheritance landed, Oliver saw a stopgap solution to maintain Alexis's extravagant tastes until he could close a few major tech deals. It was a gamble, but in his mind, he had it under control. He had no qualms about forging Charlene's signature on certain transactions or convincing her that the funds were tied up in essential expansions. He believed Charlene would never suspect. She was gentle, trusting, and occupied with her pregnancy. Little did he know, behind Charlene's calm demeanor lay the iron will of George Wilkerson's daughter. One afternoon, as he sipped a whiskey at a private lounge, Oliver scrolled through Alexis's latest Instagram photos. His chest puffed with pride at the thought of having such a dazzling woman by his side, albeit in secret. Alexis's messages demanded a new Hermes Birkin bag she had spotted. Oliver texted back with reassurance, hoping she'd remain satisfied for a while longer. Within a few minutes, Charlene called. Oliver almost didn't answer, but something in her voicemail, "We need to talk about something important," made him pick up. She requested he come home early for dinner, sounding sweet yet firm. Oliver felt a prickle of uncertainty. Charlene rarely insisted on altering his schedule, but he brushed it off, thinking perhaps she wanted to share some baby-related development. Oliver had no clue that the carefully laid trap was about to snap shut around him. He still believed he was the master of his own destiny, orchestrating two separate worlds without consequence. What he failed to realize was that his illusions were hanging by a thread, and Charlene held the scissors. Charlene decided the moment had come to set her plan in motion. With Deborah T., Carmichael's legal advice, and the mountain of evidence courtesy of Jackson Miller's investigations, she was ready to confront Oliver. She'd been hiding her fury behind sweet smiles for too long, and every day that passed felt like a betrayal of her own soul. It was a Monday evening when Oliver walked into their Beverly Hills mansion, expecting a quiet dinner. Instead, he found Charlene sitting in the living room, dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue blouse, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. On the table before her lay two neatly stacked piles of papers and a laptop. Oliver frowned, loosening his tie. "What's all this?" he asked, forcing a chuckle. "You look serious." Charlene gestured for him to sit. "We need to talk, Oliver. Please." He obliged, though she could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. Charlene opened the laptop, revealing photos of Oliver and Alexis shopping together, arms wrapped intimately. A slideshow advanced to screenshots of text messages, receipts from her inheritance account, and finally, the penthouse lease documents. She didn't have to say a word. The evidence spoke for itself. Oliver's face went pale. He attempted a laugh, nervous and hollow. What is this? Where did you get these?" Charlene's voice was steady, surprising even herself. "That's not the question you should be asking. You should be asking why you thought you could use my father's money to fund your mistress's lavish lifestyle." Oliver blanched, standing up in an attempt to regain control. "Let's calm down. This is a misunderstanding." Charlene rose too, a hand instinctively resting on her pregnant belly. "Don't you dare feed me that lie. I've traced every cent you took from my inheritance. I've hired a private investigator. My lawyer, Deborah Carmichael, has drawn up the legal consequences of your actions. Everything is right there." She pointed at the second stack of papers documents that outlined a potential lawsuit for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of trust. Oliver tried to speak, but he choked on his words, finally managing a feeble apology. "I never meant to hurt you. I just needed time. I was going to replace the money." His excuses sounded pitiful, even to himself. Charlene's eyes flashed with anger. "My father's money was meant for charity, Oliver. And if that wasn't enough, you brought another woman into our marriage. I'm pregnant with your child, and this is how you repay me." He stepped forward, arms outstretched, but Charlene recoiled. "Don't," she warned, her tone sharper than ever before. For a moment, guilt and panic flooded his face. He started to stammer. "We can fix this. I'll leave her, pay you back. It was just a mistake, a fling." Charlene's hollow laugh cut through his words. "A fling that cost me millions of dollars and my trust. Don't you dare trivialize this." Oliver looked around helplessly, scanning the room like a trapped animal. He saw the unwavering determination in Charlene's posture and realized how dire his situation truly was. She wasn't the naive, trusting heiress he'd married. She was George Wilkerson's daughter, a woman with the resources and willpower to ruin him. Before Oliver could plead further, Charlene handed him an envelope. Inside was a formal letter from Deborah's firm outlining Charlene's conditions: immediate return of all misused funds, complete severance from Alexis Hart, and an agreement that if Oliver didn't comply, Charlene would file a lawsuit and expose him publicly. Oliver's hands shook as he read. Beads of sweat broke out on his forehead. He tried to muster defiance, but the weight of Charlene's evidence and the potential fallout was immense. If the press got hold of this, his business could collapse, investors might bail, and his once venerated public image would be shattered. Swallowing hard, he finally spoke in a subdued voice. "I'll do what it takes. Just give me a chance to fix this." Charlene didn't respond, her glare cold enough to freeze him in place. Then she stood, taking one final look at the man she once believed was her life partner. Without another word, she left the room, the quiet click of her heels echoing in Oliver's ears. The once invincible entrepreneur sank into the nearest chair, realizing the gravity of what he had done. His illusions were no more. The facade lay in pieces around him. Word traveled fast in certain circles, especially among the wealthy. Alexis' heart sensed something was off the moment. Oliver declined to accompany her to a high-profile after-party. He had always jumped at the chance to show her off, to revel in the attention their illicit romance garnered. Now he was distant, texting her curt replies that lacked his usual over-the-top affection. Their next face-to-face encounter took place at the penthouse Oliver funded. Alexis had arranged a private chef to cook dinner, hoping to create a romantic ambiance. She lounged in a silk robe, sipping champagne while she waited. But when Oliver arrived, tense and brooding, the sparks she usually felt fizzled into concern. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice sultry but tinged with worry. Oliver paced the room, ignoring the tantalizing smell of garlic and rosemary wafting from the kitchen. He finally turned to her. "Charlene found out," he said simply, face drawn. Alexis's eyes widened. She'd always feared this day might come, but she had grown complacent, believing Oliver had it all under control. "So what? You can smooth things over, right?" He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "It's worse than that. She's threatening legal action and public exposure. I could lose everything, my company, my reputation. She wants the money back, Alexis. Millions of dollars." Alexis's mouth fell open. She was not just an idle bystander in this drama. If Oliver's finances were frozen or compromised, she'd lose the lifestyle she'd grown to love. "What about me?" she demanded, voice sharp with panic. "We have a lease here. Is she shutting that down too?" Oliver nodded grimly. "Yes, she wants me to cut ties immediately." Alexis's lip curled in frustration. She had no intention of giving up her penthouse or the benefits she reaped from being Oliver's mistress. She'd invested time in him, in their brand of secrecy, and she wasn't about to watch it vanish. "Then fight her," Alexis snapped. "Hire the best lawyers. She can't just ruin your life because of a marital spat." Oliver laughed bitterly. "Marital spat? You don't understand. She has evidence of misappropriating her inheritance. She can press charges. The court will side with her, and I'll be labeled a thief." Alexis's expression hardened. Fear and anger churned within her. "You told me you had this under control, that your marriage was more of a facade, and you could get the money whenever you wanted." He flinched. "It's complicated, Alexis. Charlene's father was a powerful man, and she inherited not just money, but influence. People are lining up to help her, and she's pregnant with my child. Even the optics of that are damning for me." Something unreadable flickered in Alexis's eyes, perhaps a momentary guilt. Then, just as swiftly, it was replaced by self-preservation. "What do you plan to do? Beg her forgiveness? Maybe you should just divorce her. Then we can finally be together openly." Oliver glared at her, frustration welling up. "Don't you get it? A divorce would be a nightmare right now. She'd drag me through the courts, and I'd lose all support from my investors. They don't want to be associated with scandal. And with the baby on the way, she'd get sympathy, and I'd be a pariah." Alexis sighed, sinking onto the tufted velvet couch. "Fine, you handle the legal mess. But don't expect me to sit around waiting. I have to protect my own interests." Oliver stared at her, realization dawning that Alexis's devotion was as conditional as her lifestyle was extravagant. He had hoped for support, maybe an embrace that would ease his anxiety. Instead, her cold practicality only underscored the fact that she was with him for what he could provide. "I can't keep funding everything," he admitted, voice weary. "Charlene wants the money returned. I'll try to stall, but eventually I have to close deals to pay back what I took." Alexis's expression darkened at the suggestion that the money flow might stop. She rose, crossing her arms. "You'd better figure out a way to fix this, Oliver. I'm not going back to some dingy apartment or giving up the lifestyle I've built. If you let her win, you'll lose me too." Her ultimatum hit him like a slap. He realized that, in his quest for success and pleasure, he'd bound himself to two demanding women, one with legitimate moral and legal standing, and the other with a voracious appetite for luxury. As Alexis retreated to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her, Oliver sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. In that moment, he felt the walls closing in. There was no easy path forward. If he complied with Charlene, Alexis would likely walk away, leaving him high and dry. If he fought Charlene, he risked public disgrace and possible legal ruin. Faced with these impossible choices, Oliver finally understood that his empire built on lies and grand illusions was on the brink of collapse. While Oliver floundered, Charlene assembled a circle of support that fortified her resolve. She confided in Laura Wilkerson, her trusted cousin and friend, who offered emotional solace and practical help. Laura connected Charlene with a public relations consultant, Samantha Layton, well known for handling high-profile scandals. Samantha had a polished demeanor, her every word measured as she addressed Charlene's concerns in her sleek downtown office. "Your story is compelling," Samantha noted, scanning the summary of Charlene's predicament. A pregnant heiress, betrayed by her husband, who used her inheritance to spoil a mistress. It's headline gold, but we must manage the narrative carefully, or it could spiral out of control. Charlene nodded. "I don't want to be seen as vindictive, but I need justice, and I won't stand by while my father's legacy is exploited for someone else's greed." Samantha offered a small smile. "Understood. We'll position you as a woman standing up for her unborn child's future and safeguarding charitable interests. This is about more than revenge, it's about principle." Meanwhile, Deborah Carmichael was finalizing the legal angle. She arranged a meeting with Oliver's lawyers to present Charlene's demands: immediate repayment of the stolen funds, a transfer of any assets purchased with her inheritance back to her name, and a formal separation agreement that protected Charlene from any further financial wrongdoing. If Oliver refused, a lawsuit would proceed. Charlene was also preparing for her clandestine meeting with Mark Remington, the journalist. She knew that if Oliver tried to strong-arm her or manipulate public sentiment, she would have an ally in the press. Late one afternoon, she slipped on a simple beige trench coat, pulled her hair into a low ponytail, and headed to a small cafe near the Los Angeles Tribune's office. Mark Remington was already seated at a corner table, nursing a cappuccino. He stood when he saw her, greeting her with a warm handshake. Charlene recognized the lines of age and experience around his eyes, a testament to his years in investigative journalism. They spoke in subdued tones, Charlene handing him sanitized versions of the evidence photos, financial documents, text message screenshots. Mark skimmed through them, occasionally raising an eyebrow. "This is thorough," he remarked. "If this goes public, Oliver Cooper's reputation will take a massive hit, possibly irreversible." Charlene exhaled shakily. "I'm aware. I don't relish destroying him, but he left me no choice. I won't let him or his mistress keep benefiting from my father's legacy." Mark leaned in, eyes earnest. "I'll do this story justice. I owe your father a lot, and I respect you for how you're handling this. Just be prepared. Once it's out there, you can't control every headline." Charlene nodded. She knew the risk, but it was one she was willing to take. In the days that followed, Charlene continued her routine as if nothing were amiss. She attended prenatal yoga sessions, visited her doctor, and occasionally appeared at society luncheons. Yet beneath the surface calm, she was orchestrating the downfall of the man who had wronged her. Oliver sensed her quiet determination, and it made him restless. He spent hours on the phone with potential investors, desperate to secure funds to repay Charlene. But rumors started swirling that Oliver Cooper was in financial trouble, and potential backers grew wary. Alexis grew impatient too. She posted cryptic messages on social media about undying love, turning into betrayal, likely aimed at stirring sympathy. But the more her followers asked questions, the more Alexis retreated into cryptic silence, perhaps realizing that Charlene's wrath could explode any day now. And so the stage was set. Charlene stood, strong and resolute, armed with legal, PR, and journalistic firepower. Oliver flailed between desperation and denial, while Alexis feared losing her golden goose. The world outside remained oblivious for the moment, but soon the carefully constructed illusions would crumble in a blaze of public scandal. Charlene could almost taste the retribution, and she knew it would be served cold. The unraveling began on a crisp Wednesday morning when the Los Angeles Tribune ran a front-page teaser: high-profile tech entrepreneur accused of misusing wife's inheritance. Though the article did not name Oliver directly, those in elite circles recognized the clues pointing to Cooper Innovations. Within hours, social media started buzzing. The cryptic references matched rumors of Oliver's recent desperation to secure funds, and the name Charlene Wilkerson Cooper trended on local Twitter feeds. Paparazzi camped outside their mansion, trying to capture the first shots of the wealthy heiress at the center of the scandal. Oliver woke to a barrage of phone calls and texts from colleagues, investors, and even relatives who had read the story. He rushed downstairs, where Charlene calmly sipped tea at the dining room table, a copy of the Los Angeles Tribune laid out next to her plate. "What did you do?" he demanded, voice hoarse. She met his gaze unflinching. "I gave them the truth," she said simply. He inhaled sharply. "You've put my entire company at risk. Do you know how this makes me look?" Charlene stood, her pregnant belly prominent beneath her blouse. "Yes, I do. And you're the one who put us here. Now it's time to face the consequences." Oliver shook his head in disbelief. Before he could say more, his phone rang again. He retreated to his study, slamming the door behind him. Charlene could hear his muffled voice, shouting something about media spin and damage control. By midday, a second wave of online articles appeared, some even naming Alexis Hart as a possible mistress. Alexis's Instagram followers flooded her posts with questions. Instead of responding, Alexis turned off comments, fueling further speculation. Soon, national gossip columns picked up the story, hungry to showcase a salacious tale of betrayal and scandal. Charlene's phone buzzed incessantly with messages of support from friends and family, plus the occasional harassing call from curious strangers. Laura Wilkerson came by to check on Charlene, offering to help manage the chaos. Meanwhile, Samantha Layton, Charlene's PR consultant, was busy issuing statements. Mrs. Cooper prioritizes her unborn child's well-being and is cooperating fully with legal proceedings to reclaim misused funds. She remains committed to charitable initiatives, despite the challenging circumstances. Investors in Cooper Innovations began to panic. Some threatened to pull out if Oliver did not address the allegations immediately and clear his name. Desperate to salvage his company, Oliver arranged a press conference for the following day at a luxury hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Charlene stayed silent that evening, ignoring Oliver's attempts to discuss strategy. She retired to the nursery, gently running her hands over the crib she had picked out weeks ago, her mind replaying the chain of events that led them to this precipice. Though she felt a twinge of sorrow for the public nature of the scandal, her conviction held firm Oliver had to be held accountable. That night, the media frenzy exploded. Popular talk shows hosted panels discussing the riches to rags angle, speculation about prenups, and the morality of Oliver's actions. On one late-night show, a comedian quipped, "Misusing your pregnant wife's inheritance to fund a mistress?" In L.A., That's like trying to swim with sharks while bleeding. Bad idea. Charlene went to bed early, telling herself that tomorrow would be the beginning of the end. As she switched off the lights, she felt the baby kick and whispered a promise to her child. This chaos won't define us. I'll make sure of it. Outside, the press huddled in clusters, cameras flashing whenever a light turned on in the windows. Inside, the once luxurious fortress felt like a cage of secrets and sorrow. And somewhere across town, Alexis Hart watched her phone, dread filling her heart as she realized she was not merely a bystander, she was about to be publicly named and shamed as well. The next morning, Oliver stood behind a podium in the opulent ballroom of the Regency Hotel. He wore a tailored suit, trying to project calm authority, yet his hands shook as he adjusted the microphone. Rows of reporters, photographers and camera crews filled the space, waiting to broadcast his statement live. Charlene opted not to attend in person. Instead, she watched the live stream from the comfort of her father's study, with Laura by her side. It wasn't her place to shield Oliver from the consequences. This was his mess. Clearing his throat, Oliver began. I'd like to address the recent allegations circulating in the media. First, I want to make it clear that I have the utmost respect for my wife, Charlene Cooper, and her family legacy. Any suggestion that I have intentionally misappropriated funds is premature and not based on the full facts. His speech was carefully scripted, peppered with phrases like misunderstanding and temporary financial reallocation. He dodged direct mention of Alexis Hart, only vaguely referring to private matters that do not concern the public. Reporters unleashed a flurry of questions. Is it true you used your wife's inheritance for personal gain? Have you been unfaithful to your wife, who is pregnant with your child? What about the penthouse property leased in Alexis Hart's name? Oliver's calm facade began to crack. He tried to deflect, insisting that no wrongdoing occurred, but the wave of skepticism was overwhelming. The final straw came when a tenacious reporter from a local affiliate stood up and said, "We have documents showing your signature authorizing transfers from your wife's inheritance to fund the lease of Miss Hart's penthouse." "Care to comment?" Oliver stammered. The entire ballroom seemed to collectively hold its breath. Finally he mumbled, "I have no comment on Miss Hart's personal finances." Camera shutters clicked frantically, capturing the moment. Online, viewers mocked him on social media for his non-denial. Memes sprouted, picturing Oliver's sweaty brow next to the tagline, "No comment." From the study, Charlene watched, feeling an odd mix of triumph and sadness. This was the father of her child, after all, and seeing him humiliated publicly was bittersweet. But she reminded herself of the betrayal, the stolen money, and the mistress. Actions had consequences, and Oliver was finally facing his. After the press conference, Oliver fled the hotel amidst jeering questions. His phone lit up with missed calls and messages from business partners. He tried calling Charlene, but she didn't pick up. When she finally checked her messages, there was one tearful voicemail from Oliver, begging for a chance to talk. She ignored it, letting her lawyer Deborah handle all formal communications. News coverage that evening was brutal, with every network dissecting Oliver's shaky performance. Some panelists predicted a swift downfall for Cooper Innovations. Stocks tied to his ventures took a hit as anxious investors bailed. Meanwhile, tabloids emblazoned images of Alexis, dredging up her modeling past and speculation about her connection to Oliver. At a small bar on the outskirts of town, Alexis Hart watched the broadcast with a sinking feeling. A friend tapped her shoulder sympathetically, but Alexis shrugged it off, her mind whirling. She realized her chance of forging a respectable public image was slipping away. She cursed Oliver for his failure to control the narrative. In the hours that followed, Charlene received a supportive call from Mark Remington at the Los Angeles Tribune. "Well, that was quite the show," he remarked. "Are you satisfied?" Charlene sighed. "It's not over yet, but this is the start of him taking responsibility. Thank you for exposing the story with integrity, Mark." He wished her well, and Charlene ended the call, sinking back into the leather chair in her father's study. Laura squeezed her hand, offering a gentle smile. "You did the right thing," Laura said. "Your father would be proud." Exhausted, Charlene allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. She knew she was forever changed by this ordeal. But as she stroked her belly, she silently vowed that her child's life would be built on honesty, love, and dignity, everything Oliver had so woefully betrayed. In the wake of Oliver's disastrous press conference, Alexis Hart found herself at the center of a spiraling scandal. Hounded by trolls and abandoned by sponsors, she hid in the penthouse, watching her once glamorous life crumble. She repeatedly called Oliver, but he offered no solutions. His resources were now diverted to crisis management. Desperate, Alexis agreed to an exclusive tabloid interview, hoping to salvage her reputation. Her plan backfired spectacularly. She stumbled over her lies, contradicting herself on camera and exposing how deeply she'd known about Charlene's inheritance. The public turned on her, mocking her attempts at portraying herself as a victim. Brands cut ties, and her agent dropped her altogether. Realizing she had lost her golden ticket, Alexis packed up the designer items Oliver had bought her. With a final, scornful text to him, "I'm done. Good luck with your mess." She fled Los Angeles, leaving behind a ruinous legacy as the mistress who fell from grace. With Alexis gone, Oliver found himself cornered, facing a wife armed with an army of attorneys and a brewing lawsuit that threatened to dismantle his entire empire. Deborah T. Carmichael finalized the formal complaint, detailing every instance of financial misappropriation. The documents demanded full restitution, punitive damages, and legal fees. Charlene sent Oliver a final ultimatum through Deborah: settle out of court under these terms or face a very public trial. The settlement terms included 1. Immediate transfer of any remaining misused funds back to Charlene's account. 2. Liquidation of certain Cooper Innovations assets to repay her inheritance. 3. A public apology and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. 4. An agreement that Charlene would maintain full custody of their unborn child, with Oliver having supervised visitation unless future court orders stipulated otherwise. Oliver balked at the custody demand, but even he recognized he had no leverage left. His name was mud in the media, investors were distancing themselves, and every day brought new rumors about potential lawsuits from minority shareholders who felt misled. At a final negotiation session, Oliver arrived looking haggard, dark circles under his eyes. His once confident posture deflated. Charlene sat across a mahogany table, Deborah by her side. The tension in the air was palpable. "What do you want from me?" Oliver asked, voice hollow. "My company is in shambles. I can't magically produce millions overnight." Charlene stared at him, remembering the charming suitor who once vowed eternal devotion. That man was gone, replaced by a shell. "Figure it out," she replied coldly. "Sell your shares. Downsize operations, do whatever it takes. I'm not responsible for your choices." Oliver's eyes flickered with a mixture of shame and desperation. He turned to Deborah, attempting to negotiate the custody terms, but Charlene stood firm. "My child will not be subjected to your toxic lifestyle. Earn the right to be in their life again." Deborah slid the settlement papers across the table. Oliver took a shaky breath and scribbled his signature. The weight of finality descended on the room. From her seat, Charlene tried to steady the tremor in her hand. She had envisioned a different future, a family united, love thriving, but life had taken a cruel turn. Outside the firm's office, paparazzi snapped photos, capturing Oliver's defeated expression. He muttered a short no comment before ducking into a waiting car. Charlene followed after some moments, her composure intact. She had just won a crucial victory, but her heart felt heavy. Still, she reminded herself that this step was necessary to secure her baby's future. The stolen inheritance would be reclaimed, Oliver would be forced to atone, and the public had seen the truth of his betrayal. As the legal dust began to settle, Charlene could see the road ahead, one that involved single motherhood, healing, and rebuilding her life free from deceit. Now only the final chapter remained, turning this painful saga into something meaningful, not just for her, but for the causes her father cared about. Charlene intended to ensure that out of the ashes of this scandal, a brighter, more hopeful legacy would shine. With the legal battles behind her, Charlene left the Beverly Hills mansion, unable to face its haunting memories. Instead, she found comfort in a smaller ocean view penthouse. There, she poured her reclaimed inheritance into something meaningful, the George Wilkerson Sanctuary for Mothers. Housed in a restored downtown building, it offered safe shelter, medical care, and job training for expectant women in need. At the sanctuary's opening ceremony, Charlene stood before a modest crowd. Months of scandal and heartbreak had led her here, but she felt more empowered than ever. She publicly honored her late father's legacy, vowing that the foundation would extend hope to those most vulnerable. Oliver Cooper, left reeling by his downfall, sold off parts of Cooper Innovations to repay what he'd taken. He sent Charlene a letter admitting regret and asked to see their child someday. She didn't respond immediately. Trust would take time to rebuild, if ever. Eventually, Charlene welcomed a healthy baby girl, Georgina, named after her father. Holding her daughter in the hospital's soft morning light, Charlene was filled with renewed hope. She had survived betrayal and public scrutiny, emerging with a clear purpose to raise her child in a world guided by honesty, compassion, and her father's enduring spirit. And so ends the tumultuous tale of wealth, betrayal, and justice. Charlene's world was turned upside down when her husband, Oliver, funneled her inheritance into a luxury lifestyle with his mistress, Alexis. Yet, through heartbreak, legal warfare, and a media storm, Charlene found her resolve. She reclaimed not just her father's legacy, but her own power and dignity. Oliver and Alexis paid the ultimate price, public humiliation and shattered reputations, forced to face the consequences of their selfish desires. Charlene emerged stronger, dedicating her restored fortune to a cause that honored her father's memory. Even as a single mother, she found purpose in nurturing new life, her baby girl, Georgina, and helping vulnerable mothers in need. This story reminds us that while betrayal can strike like a thief in the night, resilience and truth can vanquish even the darkest lies. If you found this real-life drama gripping, please like, share, and subscribe to support more captivating stories on this channel. Share Charlene's journey, and let's inspire others to stand up for justice. Your support helps us continue creating compelling content.